Good morning, everybody. We'll get started in a few minutes. Just waiting for more people to pop on in. Good morning, everybody. I know people are still probably trickling in. So welcome to the final challenge webinar. Today we will be doing the sixth and final challenge, which is verification and comparison for coalition space domain awareness. Welcome back. I believe most of you have probably already joined one of our webinars over the past 2 weeks. If not, and this is your very first webinar, so you see the best for last. Thank you for joining us. My name is Brandon Florian. I am with Starburst Accelerator. We are the commercial entity working with the US DoD and the UK MOD to deliver the International Space Pitch Day as part of the overall Allied Defense Accelerator program. Before I hand it over real quick to Captain Busby from SMC to do a few introductory remarks, I just want to make sure that everyone is familiar with the Zoom tool and how we're doing it and how we're going to be using it for this webinar. The most important function being the Q&A function that we're going to use later on to do the Q&A piece at the end of this webinar. So at the bottom, if you're in full screen mode and you hover towards the bottom, you'll see buttons pop up. There's a little Q&A button in there. We would ask that any participant who has a question for any of the panelists to write your question in there at any given time during the actual webinar, and we will save those for the end and then post those questions to the panelists. So that is the one true function that I think everyone should be aware of. Again, if you have not visited the International Space Pitch Day website, I will put that in the chat function, which is the button right next to the Q&A function, and you'll be able to access the website. You'll be able to register for participation in the challenge being put out by DASA. And just a reminder that all interested suppliers / companies, startups who wish to submit an application or a proposal for the challenge, they must be registered by August 19th, even though the submission due date is September 2nd. But I just want to make it clear that registration is required in order to submit a proposal 3 weeks later. So with that, I will turn it over to Captain Busby, SMC, and he will start us off.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Again, like Brandon said, thanks for joining. My name is Captain Murph Busby. I'm coming from the programmatic team out of SMC that's helping facilitate the event. My background is, of course, Air Force Pitch Day that was hosted last November, and then the SBIR portfolio. Overall, as we go through this, please ask questions. If you feel that your solution maybe answers a piece of it, but maybe not the whole question, please raise your hand, please register, please come forward. We're still very, very much interested, and if it's, if it's a piece, it's, it'll go into the overall solution. So for us, it's highly, highly valuable. So again, please ask questions. Please ping your panelists. There'll be some links sent out at the end for you to be able to submit more questions as you do your due diligence. So thanks, Brandon.
All right. Thank you, Captain Busby. And with that, we will hand it over to the challenge chair for today, who is Major Nick Snyder from the National Space Defense Center. So, Major Snyder, if you could turn on your camera and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Hey, how's everybody doing? My name is Major Nick Snyder. I'm the J71 and J72 out at the Joint Task Force for Space Defense, working hand in hand with the National Space Defense Center. So we've been doing a lot of the stuff with SACTs, Sprint Advanced Concept Trainings and whatnot, basically bringing space domain awareness and the space fight kind of to the to the next century, or the cutting edge. With this challenge today, what we're looking for is basically like an ensemble catalog. The idea is that we have one place where they can take a multitude of different formats for SDA, and then be able to provide that out into one space cop, or one usable format, if that makes sense.
Got it. All right. Well, Major Snyder, thank you for that introduction. With that, I would like our panelists today to go ahead and turn on your cameras, unmute yourselves, and if we could have a quick introduction from each of you as far as what your role is, what organization you work for, and yeah, and we'll start it off there. So let's start off with Tony DeCarbo.
Good day, everyone. Welcome to, as Brandon said, the final webinar for the National Space Pitch Day. It's been a lot of fun. I am Tony DeCarbo. I am the technical advisor at the Combined Force Space Component Command. CIFSEC is one of two components of United States Space Command. The other component is JTFSD that Major Snyder was talking about a second ago. That's my role. And again, please feel free to ask any questions, and we'll be able to hopefully answer them and really help you develop your proposals for this event. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tony. Ms. Barbara Golf, you're next.
Morning, my name is Barbara Golf. I'm the senior trainer at the National Space Defense Center. I'm also the white cell controller for the Sprint Advanced Concept Training events that you've heard mentioned. Over.
Thank you. Colonel Miller.
Good morning, Colonel Miller Belmont. For the 75th Innovation Command in my reserve capacity, I am the Chief Innovation Officer for Space. We focus on the multi-domain operations side of the Army's space work. And for my civilian capacity, I'm the Director of Experimentation, Army Space and Missile Defense Command, basically where we take our equipment to the field and schlep it across the Valley of Death, TRLs 4, 5, and 6, which is pretty much your field trials. And essentially, we are the primary consumer of the efforts underway here today with the work of the Air Force.
Great, thank you, sir. Lieutenant Ryan Holden.
Hi, so good morning, everyone. Flight Lieutenant Ryan Holden. So OC Mission Tactics Flight at RAF Fylingdales. So we're responsible for developing the tactics and procedures that our operators will use within the center, and also the advanced training and combat ready training that goes with that for them. Thank you.
Great. And then last but not least, Mr. Bowler.
Good morning, all. My name is Richard Bowler, go by Rags. I'm the Senior Tech Advisor for Science and Technology for Major General Bill LaCourie at Headquarters U.S. Space Force here in Colorado Springs. Over.
Great. Thank you. All right. With that, Major Snyder, is there a particular question that you would like to start off by posing to the panelists regarding this challenge, or would you like me to kick it off?
No, the only thing I will ask is Barb, do you have anything that you can throw out there that would add some codifying information or codifying questions?
Sure, I can. So one of the things we are looking at, we have been struggling with the idea of a common operating picture for quite some time. And what we have been working with or struggling with is this idea of how to deal with the multitude of data sources, which are absolutely necessary in order to maintain operations in a resilient manner in a contested environment. Any single data source that we crown king as far as being our accuracy standard is likely to be the first data source that gets under attack. And so in these types of environments, we are looking for how to leverage the crowd, leverage the variety of sources in order to get a more complete picture. However, this does lead to very serious problems as far as trying to integrate these sources. We are working through or exploring, I guess is the way to think about it, two different ways to address this. The first is our more traditional way, which is fusion of data, which has all sorts of attendant problems with it tied to what's the pedigree of the data, what are the accuracy or validation standards of the data, all these things that can tend to slow down the dynamics, the dynamism of commercial and civil sources as you lock them down to put them in a particular format or standard. As a result, in contrast to that more traditional accuracy-based route of pulling in data, we are also looking at a precision-based method where precision, deviation, comparison between a variety of sources in a fast and flexible manner is another piece that we're trying to consider in order to speed things up, buy down risk of, again, crowning a single source as king, and allow the flexibility for rapid development as we are moving forward in this problem set. Any questions there?
Hey, this is Tony. No questions, and I am really, really glad Barb's online today. I've worked with Barb for a few years. And what she said, if you remember back to the very first webinar we had, what Barb raised is exactly the same key points that I raised for that visualization piece. And the reason I jumped in, I'm really excited about that is because I don't think Barb had been part of that first webinar. So the people who are going to provide the proposals, that's a few independent, completely two different people with different perspective, different jobs, who have identified the same issue. So Barb, thank you so much for that affirmation. Over.
Great. So let's see. I guess I would like to start off by kind of getting everyone's perspective, since we have so many different organizations represented here. How does the common operating picture play into what your organizations use, and then the requirements needed behind those, and what do you see as the current gaps that exist? So let's start off with Colonel Belmont.
Thanks for that question, Brandon. Okay, so the way the Army has to look at this is kind of threefold. The first is training, and the visualization is probably the most important aspect of training that I can think of. And the reason is, if you're brought up in the Air Force, you're brought up, pure space all your life. And then, your need for the visualization tools aren't really as serious as they are for the Army guys, because we don't bring our space officers in until they're about captains, and oftentimes even later than that. So the ramp up on training for us is extremely steep in terms of orbital mechanics and those types of problem sets. The visualization of that is probably the number one factor in helping FA40s get on board with the necessary training to get up to speed to where they're actually competent space officers. Now, the other two factors, separating training out, the other two factors is everything a commander has to do comes down to basically two things. The first is situational awareness. So the situational awareness side is going to drive commanders' decisions in terms of where they're going to set up on the battlefield, whether that's locally or regionally or geographically. It's going to determine the plan of action. It's going to determine routes. It's going to determine everything in terms of overhead imagery that's gray, overhead imagery that's red, comms that are blue. And that's the second biggest factor that visualization provides to the commander. The third thing the Army has to have from what the Air Force is doing with this is targeting data. It doesn't necessarily have to be space targets. As the Space Force, starts to throw its muscle around, we're not gonna have as big a game in space as we used to, but we are still the ground game. And that means everything we do on the ground that's affected by space is still gonna be in our play box. And that visualization capability is gonna drive a lot of that. And a major factor of that is gonna be targeting. And not just, like I said, not just the space assets, but also how we target ground assets that control space capabilities. So those are the three main factors we look at when we're looking at visualization: is the training, commander situational awareness, and our ability to target.
Great, thank you, sir. Rags, how about you?
Thanks. I've been making a couple notes while you've been talking here. And of course, the focus of U.S. Space Force is to provide the capabilities of the warfighter that they need to make these things happen. So in order to make that happen, we have to have an understanding of what space domain awareness is. And, from our perspective, that is providing the commander and the staff with the correct space picture. And as Colonel Belmont said, that is in the form of some type of visualization. Why? Because it is difficult to understand what is happening in space. It is not what you see happening here on the ground. The gravitational forces and everything don't exist as much in space as much. But so you have to understand that, and that's one of the things we need to work on. So it's tough, and our job is to provide those capabilities to the warfighter. And I wanted to stress one more thing. Let's talk about a thing that we call sensor data confidence. And that is the fact that all of these sensors, these myriad of sensors that we have in the field, are all providing data. And we have to be able to tell the commander not only what's going on in space, but we have to provide him the confidence level of what all these sensors are providing us. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, sir. Sorry, I muted myself. Lieutenant Holden?
Yeah, thanks, Brandon. So we've taken a different sort of look at this one, and it more lines up with what Barbara was saying earlier. To the space domain awareness pieces, we can break it down into different parts, and it's these things that people can bring in different parts of the different parts of the pie, sorry. And so number one, where is it? The most simple thing that we all want to know in space is to where is it? Number two, what is it? And then the thing that has been brought up a lot on the other conferences that we had, what is the potential for it to do next? That is the predictive part as to what can we do next with it. And if you break these things down, it's not something we've done efficiently over time. So if you think the Space Surveillance Network, it's all held by the 18th Space, and then they task out each of the sensors as we go. Now, I'm sure most of you on the panel will agree who work in this domain that as soon as a new object appears, the resources that it takes to identify that object and catalog it are tremendous. And it's that duplication of effort from all of the sensors that builds and builds and builds, which is something this operational picture could help everyone with. So first of all, where is it? Use your radars. Let them have a look at it. Track it. Find out where it is. Number two, what is it? use something optical, have a look at it, find out where it is. So it's building these things together, and it's allowing these things to join together. Barbara mentioned earlier Fusion. So I'm sure everyone's done a document in Microsoft Word, spent hours on it and saved it as compatible. And then somebody opens it in Pages at the other side and it looks like a pile of garbage. So it's one of those things that is something that we need to be able to get these things to link together and queue our sensors smartly. As more and more things go up, we've got enough sensors now to probably do the job and do it hydraulically. But as more and more things get up there, we need to look at it faster and faster and faster. And it's that smart queuing and possibly the ability of that operational picture to do some of that for the operator. And then the human interaction on top of that to be able to use it even more efficiently. That's our first sort of part of call on that one. Thanks.
Great. I'll bring it back to Major Snyder or Ms. Golf if you guys have any comments also.
Yeah, I do. Kind of listening through this and working through it, a couple of thoughts came to mind. So one of the biggest challenges that we have as we work across a multitude of different classification levels with our own entities, but then you also throw in the allies into that, the shareability is a big piece. So as data comes in and we can manage to fuse all that data like some of the other panelists were mentioning, to get that common operating picture. And by the way, it's not really a common operating picture, it's more of a common data set. Are we looking at the same thing? Are we identifying the same object, and what is the most accurate solution? Processing that into a visualization in a timely manner, and then being able to quickly disseminate it to the people that it matters to. So for example, if you have some kind of a conjunction that's going to be happening in space, it doesn't tell me a whole lot just to tell the owner operator, hey, you're going to have a conjunction at this time, or a point of closest approach. You need to know, where is it coming from? What is the best time to do that? Do the maneuvers or whatever to get out of the way. And that can be that's just a simple example. That can be across a whole spectrum of different operations in space, all the way to the warfighting and targeting types of space. But it really needs to be timely. It needs to be shareable, and then there needs to be a function of accuracy of, are we looking at the same thing? Are we, as we're getting different obs on it, so a radar ob is different than a visual or optical ob, which is different from a signal ob. Are we getting all that stuff and looking at the same thing? One of the common things that we do in the center is, hey, we do a stability check. Is this a stable object? Is this actually what we're looking for? Or is this thing just trash floating through space? And getting a lot of that feature data to help out with that as well helps fuse that information of, hey, are we looking at the right thing? So going back to the common operating picture, I tend to stray away from that terminology, because with the common operating picture, that like on the ground, that implies like a FBCV2 or something like that, where you have your map, you have where all your units are located, and it's all hunky-dory. But in space, it's a lot harder, because your terrain is in 3 dimensions, and Kepler's in the driver's seat, rather than just, hey, driving along the roads, driving along the ground that you can easily see. So one of the things that we have to do is it needs to be a common data, access to that data, but they can manipulate the picture however they need to, based on who is using that data. So a common operating picture for 4 SOPs is completely different for what a common operating picture for 1 SOPs may look like, and that's the biggest thing. So I think that if you fuse the data and then make it accessible and shareable across everybody, then everybody can manipulate what that picture needs to look like for them.
Hey, Brandon, I just want to really foot stomp what Nick just said and what Major Snyder just said. The common operational picture, and I agree, I think we have to sort of get away from that term. It's really a user-defined operational picture. So he's talking about 4 SOPs. Your JTFSD or NSDC is going to need a picture. The CSPOC is going to need a picture. And getting to guys like Colonel Belmont, when there's forces on the ground, they're not going to need all that information. They're going to need to know what capabilities are there, in addition to a visualization that they would have, that would have sort of like what Geeks provides today, that the land and air and sea domain on the ground for those operations. So the forces on the deck are going to have a different perspective. So the key is that user-defined capability for the visualization. And it all goes back to, like we said before, it all goes back to the data. Fusing the data, doing, I think Barb said, precision-based, addressing of the data. The data is really key. The visualization piece is kind of the wrapping of that data, but it must be user-defined. And I know that's what Nick just said. I just really wanted to foot stomp that from the CIFSIC perspective. It's the same need. So hopefully the providers can understand that. And if there's any questions, please, we'll get those during the Q&A period. Over.
Thank you so much. And of course, I definitely want to go back to Captain Busby. Basically, I would definitely like to hear the perspective on space portfolio side. What are you guys looking for as far as the future? What gaps do you guys see that could be addressed by, some commercial technology that's being developed that we're not thinking about?
So when it comes to kind of your space domain awareness, there's a whole bunch of pieces to this puzzle. Kind of like what's already been mentioned, like each unit's going to look at it differently. I do have an ops background, not in space, different mission area. But what I'm doing at my unit is going to look different than what another unit's doing, even though we're accomplishing the same mission. So when it comes to this, it's not only how we're handling the data, but how the operator's actually interacting with that. Is it, are you building me an app? Is it a text stream? Is it an AR, VR tool so that I can, no kidding, like step into the holodeck on Star Trek? All these are questions, and it's going to take a little trial and error, but it's all things that we're interested in. What I, as a frontline, operator, what I might be interested in and what I might be tracking is not the same kind of information that my boss is going to be curious about. So there's a question in that too. How do I see things at my level? And when something needs to be elevated, how do I navigate through, not only my chain of command, but the various, classification levels? And then again, how do I share those with my allies? And how user-friendly is that? The space community is made up of a whole different, group of people. You'll have high school graduates. You'll have officers with, STEM degrees, master's degrees, PhDs. How can we process that information in a way that is, easily understood for your, frontline operator, and that we can elevate as needed. So again, like there's a whole bunch of pieces to this. And I think it's not going to be just one solution. It's going to be a bunch of pieces coming together to develop what really is, a common operating picture.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I guess, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I have one thing to add here. We've all talked through the common operating picture piece, but I didn't hear anything too specific on the data aspects. And I heard Major Snyder in the beginning mention the ensemble catalog. I wanted to mention a little bit more what we meant by that, what that problem is. So what we're talking about here is the fact that this is, when we are trying to get information on these objects, these are not things we can reach out and touch. So we actually don't have a very good sense of truth about what we are talking about. And when you are taking data from a variety of different sources, it is not very easy to figure out if you're talking about the same thing. It is a congested, competitive environment. There's a lot of stuff up there. And things are getting closer and closer together. So as we're doing this, it is very difficult, particularly with some of the older data formats that we're using that do not include error in them. When things are in close, which one are you talking about? Which one of the 3, 4, 5, 7 are we talking about? Are we talking about the same thing? And because we are dealing with things that are not just military standardized to a particular format, we're talking about sources with a variety of different numbering systems, nomenclatures, some of which are duplicative, even when they are talking about different objects. This can be very confusing. And so that piece of, when we talk about the ensemble catalog, we are looking at how to create some form of dynamic Rolodex or inventory check. When I'm looking at a variety of different sources coming in, this guy numbered it a particular number. This guy numbered it a particular alphanumeric series. This guy has a totally different name for it. Are they the same? So that we can compare that and then do change detection and precision-based and then eventually fused accuracy-based analysis on this. But if I'm fusing different objects by accident, which is entirely possible when they're in close, I've ruined the entire set of perspectives that I can make. So this way of doing that quick comparison to at least identify where you may have sources of confusion, where things are in close, or things have moved around, or things have cross-tagged, is incredibly important, or you've ruined all of your visualization options from the very beginning. Does that make sense? Any questions there? Comments from the rest of the panelists? Have I explained that clearly?
Yeah, I just got a quick comment that I want to tag on to that, Barb. One of the things that you mentioned is having the same data set to where that we're all operating on the same data and how it's important to visualization. I really want to foot stomp that, because if you are using a different solve, if 3 different units are using a different solve for the same problem set, then all 3 visualizations are going to look completely different and tell a completely different story. We had a situation at the center. Can't get into too many details, but basically the difference was one solve was being used with SP data and the other one was a GP solve. And it was completely different. Looked like 2 objects were drifting together when in fact it was 2 objects RPOing in an NMC around each other. Completely different, tells a completely different story. And by bringing in all these different data types and making sure that we're all talking about the same objects, so we're using the same information when we're talking about this, regardless of what the visualization each user needs, to make sure that the base information is truth, then the story will be the same across the board.
Hey, Brandon. I know in fact, this has been a common theme in all of the webinars, the data piece. And it's important that we really continue this conversation so the providers understand what we're all talking about. You know, the training piece, and we get into predictive analysis for the what if scenarios. I mean, there's so much to the data, but the technical part of the data is only part of the issue. Joe Gerber has asked a question. I think I'll take a shot at it now, as opposed to the end. What about international policies and data sharing? See, there's a whole different avenue of things that we have to address. So does country A want to share with country B, or commercial partner A with commercial partner B? There's a lot of issues, and I know Barb's running into this a lot in the SAC-T about sharing data on an unclassified level. But when we get to our combined operations with our allies and our commercial providers, data sharing and information sharing has to be on the forefront of how we actually are able to conduct those operations, because we can have a great technical solution, but if it's not legal to share the data, then we can't do it. So I hope that answered the question. And the data piece, I really want to stress that is really critical, as we've all said.
I think
jump in.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead, Flight Lieutenant.
Yeah, so with what everyone was talking about there, it also adds into the fact that some data from that sensor may well be accurate, but it depends how accurate it is in relation to another sensor. So if we've got one sensor that has a swath of, say, 100 meters when it's out in space, but then another sensor is looking at it with a resolution of down to 5 meters, if you had that saying it's in one place and the other one saying, I'm here, don't let them start confusing with each other, because whereas you might have that big box, it's confirmed it's there, but it needs to have that level of processing down into each sensor and say, right, okay, as Bargo said, we need to know that that is one of our priority sensors and we can use that one. So don't let them get mixed up from each other.
And that brings up an excellent point. I think that one of the things that we use in the SSN is something called sensor bias, where we know the accuracy levels of certain sensors and we take those obs and they have a bigger weight over certain other ones. So I mean that's a phenomenal comment as well. I did get a question from Joe Gerber in the Q&A. One of the things that he was asking is the naming convention, going back to what does the NSDC prefer for common names? And we've gone around with this a while, but SCC numbers tend to be the best way that we can all stay on the same page. And the reason I say that is, I know I see Barb laughing there. About a couple months ago, we had one object, and because in the catalog the common names were flipped, we were talking about one bird, and they were thinking we were talking about a different bird. So whereas if we just used the SCC number, then the SCC numbers would have kept everybody straight. So I think that the SCC numbers are the best way to keep track of that naming convention piece. Barb, is there anything you want to tag on to that?
No, just confirming, sir. We anchor, one of the reasons we use the ensemble catalog type concept is that Rolodex of this guy's catalog has this number, this guy's catalog has this, alphanumeric, whatever, what have you. We anchor all of it at our use into the SCC number so that we say, okay, this is what we think it is, and we could be wrong. We could be wrong. This is what we think it is. This is what we understand. And then this is what they think it is. And then that dynamic Rolodex helps us to look at this and go, here's the precision-based picture of what we think is happening, anchored to the number we are most used to using. Over.
So I'll jump in as the consumer of all your stuff. Back in my days as a crew dog at Cheyenne Mountain, we had to take your data and then sort it out. So the first problem we always ran into was information overload, because there's just so much data coming in. So what are you going to keep? What are you going to toss? And then after that, you had to determine what was really important of the data coming in. So one day I moved off the watch. I was an analyst, but the call came in from the watch. Just like, hair on fire. I can't feel my legs. The NSA reports this. I said, yeah. Well, what did Filing-Dales report? Well, Filing-Dales reported that. I said, well, you need to go with Filing-Dales on that. And, because basically the radar doesn't lie. So knowing what's important of your data sources, going back to what Flight Lieutenant Holden said about, or actually, and also Major Snyder, sensor bias, knowing where you're getting the right picture is the most important thing, and then being able to sort the data and manage it. Now, to go to my question from Joe Gerber, he asks if we just need a space COP or if we need the ground COP as well with regard to space assets like ground control stations, the like. To answer that question, Joe, the answer is it's always a pickup game to figure out what's going on with those ground-based assets for space. So we would consider a comprehensive common operating picture to include the ground assets as well as the space assets and what the links are.
Awesome. Any further comments on that one?
No comments specifically on that one. I do have a question though about when we have the, particularly this probably really goes to the NSDC and in the 18th, we don't have anyone from the 18th here. But when we get all these pieces of data in, is there a need for a capability to determine quickly whether we need to process the data or not, and whether we just need to know it's bad and throw it on the floor, or do that processing to help the operators figure out? I mean, what do you think about that? I'll turn it over to NSDC.
I can take a first cut if you want. So the first piece that we're looking at is prioritized by what type of object it is. If this is a piece of debris way the hell over somewhere in a GTO piece that isn't going to do anything near our assets, then the answer is take your time. Like, do the right sort of processing, put all sorts of due diligence in it, and it can take you days. And for 18 Space Control, they have to do a lot of the detailed nug work to make sure that they've got a good, accurate catalog. So context, the context of what these objects are, where they are. I think Flight Lieutenant said that earlier. Where are they? Do we care? Space is big, but it can get small quickly if you mess this up. So space is big. Use your time, but don't waste your time. So pattern of life, what's normal, what's not normal for these types of objects, being able to create that sort of sense of, should my hair be on fire right now? Because not everything's the number one priority. Which one do I care about? Those sorts of pieces, that contextual understanding can help start to help you rack and stack your problem set for the day. And we are not very good at that. As far as being able to have not just the collective set of data, but the collective set of data in historical context, which also gets to Colonel Belmont's comment of, I probably trust Filingdales more than I trust a random SIGINT feed. And you can tell that by looking at the history. Really hard to get a radar to lie, unless things are in close, and then I can make it fail all the time. So that context of understanding when you can trust something, because it's not that you can always trust it, but when you can trust it is an important piece, which then helps you rack and stack and prioritize the events as they unfold. Over.
And I think Barb, I agree to everything you said. I think one of the things you just hit on, the pattern of life, and I think the need for capability for predictive analysis based on, how many data hits we have, and actually help actually determine those patterns of life. We don't have, 5, 6, 7 years worth of pattern of life data hits. So I think that's another need. Over.
Yeah, and I think we've spoken a lot about priorities there, and it's a case of what priority does the tactical unit need as well. So Filingdales, we could be tracking thousands of objects a day, but is this thing going to be in a conjunction with something? Do we need to focus our resources all on that? So if we can send that priority down to the radar without a human interaction as well, we can build that data in the background. So when that human does get involved in the process, they can go, actually, I've already got that data feed. Thanks for that. We can look at that a little bit more. So it's getting those levels down to all the layers of the operators who are going to be looking at this as well.
If I could jump in, I also think it's not just a question of priority. Yes, that's 100% important, but I think it's also your multiple phenomenology. For example, if Filingdales sees something and for example, to use Barb's example, two things are in close and it's kind of a garbage solve. Being able to have that ability to reach out cross sensors to another sensor, to have them take a second look and have the basically that crosstalk between them, that get that multiple phenomenology, especially if you can do it between, like if we're looking at a geo object and you can manage to get one optical sensor on it and one radar sensor on it, because they both are very, very good at different things. So I think that having that type of calculus going into how you're prioritizing and how you're racking and stacking your solves and what you need to spend your time on also should be part of it.
Great. Let's see. With that, if there are any other thoughts before we get into the Q&A portion, open up the floor right now.
So this is Rags, and I'd like to go back. There was a question asked before, and the question was asked, what are your gaps and where are you going next? Now, I'm not going to talk to you about specific gaps here, but I'm going to talk about, a little bit about where we're going next. And the folks that you see in front of you today are great space operators. But space operators, like all military personnel, like to get comfortable with what they're doing. And we're comfortable with what we're doing. What we need to do now is we need to get a little bit more uncomfortable. And we need to reach out to the providers who are here online today and ask you, we don't know what we don't know. So you need to help us by looking at the technology that you have available, whether that be a large chunk of technology capable of doing multiple things for us, or just a small bit of technology which is very focused on some specific activity. Please bring that forward into the Starburst environment and let us talk to you and help you and figure out if it is actually, the type of things that we're looking for. So my bottom line to all of you out there who I can't see is show us how to do this better. Help us with the technology of the future, because that's where we're going. Over.
I'll just throw in another factor there. One of the things I used to look at as a crew commander at Cheyenne Mountain was standards and evaluations of the other teams that were out there. And if we could tell that standards and eval up at one crew was just whitewashing everything and pushing it under the rug, we started to throw away their data much more easily than other organizations that held their crews to account for truth and accuracy of their reporting. And it was a wide disparity in the standards that crews were held to depending on where they were working. So there is a very big human factor to this. It is not about the technology. Over.
I agree. I think the dog in the background also agreed with you, Colonel Belmont.
He wasn't mine.
Okay. Captain Busby, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think it really is that we have a bunch of different users, different countries, different units, and it's not necessarily about everyone's picture being the same, but being able to deliver a tool that each individual users can pull the information from that they need, and that when we talk across channels, that we know that we're referring to the same objects, that we're doing the same thing, and that we have a way to accomplish the mission.
Understood. Okay, with that, there is one question that still remains open that we haven't answered, and it's directed to you, Colonel Belmont. Do you feel that you necessarily need a common operating picture that shows both ground and space simultaneously, or just a space tool because you have ground visualization covered? How might you generally describe the volume, quote unquote, data rates and the types of data you would want to include?
We do not have the ground game covered. It's very ad hoc. Basically, it's like, hey, let's go surf JWICS and see what we can find for targets. And that's not a good way to run that show. So I would say that a comprehensive common operating picture would include the links in the ground stations as well as the space picture. And then from there, the Army would narrow this down within the context of its MDO fight. And at one stage of the fight, that might be, say, communications, load shed plans, what have you. It might be counter comms, it might be counter ISR. It just depends on the phase of the battle. But it does need to be wholly comprehensive from soup to nuts, space to ground.
Great, thank you, sir. Lieutenant Holden, the Europeans have common databases like EU SST that may be available to UK or European citizens on sensors and satellite conjunctions. Do you think this accelerator program may be a good way to tighten sharing between US, UK on the commercial level?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the potential of this is if we can get that tool that can pull it all in together. Currently, we have the two operators that we work for. So we work for US Missile Warning and Space Surveillance Network, and then we work for the UK SPOC as well. And there is that disconnect there, but the link is the radar in between them. And it's that having the tool which binds everything together. So if we've got something there which can allow these things to all be drawn together, it's a benefit to everyone. So it could be a huge potential of the space of what we're doing right here, right now. Thanks.
Great. So those were all the questions that were asked so far. And I know we're a few minutes early, so if there are any final comments or remarks that anyone wants to close with, I'll open the floor up to the panel again. All right.
Brandon,
Tony? Okay.
I'll save you there. Uncomfortable silence. I think the panel really hit on the key aspects, the data, and I know Murph he went over this, but I think from all of our perspectives, and I'm not speaking for everyone, but the data is critical. Predictive analysis is critical. The integration of data sources and types from not only U.S. and UK, but from other different countries is critical. And then again, the policies and sharing agreements all have to be worked together to provide the folks on the ground, in the air, in the land, information to conduct their operations in a combined manner. And that includes the space domain as well. Over.
Thanks, Tony, for that one. Okay, well, with that, I would definitely like to thank everyone for tuning in today. I would love to thank like to thank the panelists for their great contributions on this discussion. Just as a closing, I just want to remind everyone, also as far as those who are interested in submitting a proposal for this competition, as it was foot stomped by a lot of people on here, we definitely need all ideas, all solutions. Nothing is off the table as far as whether it's a piece of the overall puzzle or if it is an entire solution. And we really want to stress that, the success of finding these solutions is basically those wild ideas, things that we're not thinking about, things that the operators are not thinking about, or the different organizations. We need that innovation, the commercial innovation piece, to really come in and maybe put a spotlight on areas that are not being thought of. And I know Captain Busby will definitely agree with me on this one. So we truly hope that those of you online that are attending from different companies, if you have ideas, please submit them. Again, if you've missed any of these or of the previous webinars that have happened, we will definitely be having, they already are online. They're posted on the International Space Pitch Day website. We look forward to seeing you again next week. And I believe this slide is not updated, but we have two more webinars next week. And those have to do with doing business in the United States and the UK, and then working with our DoD or MOD respectively. So on Monday, August 10th, we're going to be having the UK version of that panel. So it's going to be working with the UK and the MOD. We're going to have a really good panel focusing on investment readiness, transition confidence, and other international considerations for companies that are looking to work within the UK. So this is open to all international companies. If you're an international company in country X and you want to, come work in the UK and work with the MOD, how would you go about doing that? And then the same thing applies for our August 12th webinar, which is the US version of that. So, setting up shop in the US, getting on SBIRs to work with the DoD, the requirements for that. So we'll definitely have more information upcoming, especially as our panelists have now been confirmed. Please stay tuned on the International Space Pitch Day website for more information about that. Please don't forget to register so you get all the information and all the emails that we're sending out. And then, of course, once you register on the International Space Pitch Day website, there's also a link to the DASA competition site. So you are able to download the DASA competition document and see all the different various challenges that you can apply to. So with that, I will turn it back over to Captain Busby if he has any final comments. And after that, we'll end it.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add, Brandon. I think you stole my thunder there a little bit. But no, like Brandon said, the information is out there. It's available. There's links to submit your questions. Please do so. And if you have something that you're like, well, I build XYZ for ground. If you think you can pivot that to space, it still applies. It's going to be a lot of pieces to build an overall solution. So, come forward with any ideas. We don't know what we don't know. So if you think it can play in space, go ahead and throw it out there and we'll take a look at it. But again, thank you everyone for your time. Brandon, thank you for hosting again.
Yeah, and then one final comment, just as a reminder too, and this was, something that we definitely want to stress to people. We will also be coordinating an Ask Me Anything webinar that will happen the week after the last webinar, which is August 12th. So it'll happen the following week. Right now, I believe we're targeting August 20th. So it is an Ask Me Anything webinar. All suppliers are encouraged to log in and join, and especially for those of you that have any questions before you submit your proposal, we will have representatives from DASA, from DSTL, from SMC, other stakeholders as well will be on the line to answer any questions that you might have regarding your competition proposal submission. So stay tuned for that one. Again, please register, and we will see you guys next week on Monday for the Doing Business in the UK webinar. Have a great weekend, everybody.